Every villain thinks that they're a hero, but what happens when the hero realizes that they may have become the villain? I'm Kristina Wiltsee. I'm a life alchemist, and this is Inner Worlds, Outer Stories, where we look at movies and how it relates directly to our own spiritual growth and path, particularly with the view of the inner villains. A system that I've created that looks at the Enneagram, human design, whatever lens you want to look through it. It basically looks at how we can work on our own redemption arcs inside of ourselves. So today we are looking at Tony Stark and Thanos because they are a lot more similar than you think. In the Marvel Universe, two of the most iconic characters, Thanos and Tony Stark, to date, aren't as different as they seem. They both start with the same conviction. The world is broken, unsafe, and I am the only one that can fix it. Classic righteous bully work, which is what we're going to be talking about today. They both sacrifice everything, relationships, lives, and even parts of themselves. They both walk a path of control, shame, and righteous justification, believing that their vision is the only way to go forward. But only one of them learns the truth that the real power doesn't come from domination or martyrdom. It comes from surrender. It comes from realizing that connection to other people and the love that you create with them is actually better than dominating them with your extremely strong opinion, capabilities, intellect, or your vision about how the world needs to be. This is the story of the righteous bully, an archetype that lives inside of all of us, and how Tony Stark becomes the channeler, the legend of this arc, while Thanos dies after fulfilling his arc with no redemption. So let's start with understanding the righteous bully. We talked briefly about the righteous bully in the Alphaba video up here. And what you'll see is that ultimately the righteous bully sits in the Ajna center in human design, or it sits in the 8 in the Enneagram, which can also be called the enforcer for those who know anything about 8s in the Enneagram. It's also the place of the greater mother wound, in which we recognize that there's this sincere desire to protect people with your ideology, with your beliefs, with your power, with your capabilities, with your belief. Everything that you've done to come up into the position that you are, you have the opinion that you know the best possible way, and this is how we move forward. So real quick overview of the righteous bully. The righteous bully is the ultimate in this arc. They are the pinnacle villain. They are the person who sits in a space in which they are willing to destroy anybody else, humiliate, using any tactics. It could be humiliation, betrayal, rejection. They have the entire scope of tools available to them in order to destroy another person because they believe that they are righteous in their indignation. They are righteous in their opinion, and therefore they are allowed to bully anybody that they want. The second one down from this pinnacle villain is the fixer. And as with all successful antagonists in all of these arcs, you notice that this one, as the fixer, they may not be destroying other people with their beliefs, but what they are trying to do is they are infusing themselves into everybody else's life. And then when people don't listen to their brilliance of how they choose to fix something, they are then going into the righteous bully and saying, well, I'm going to destroy you because you didn't listen to me. I told you so. I told you how to fix this. You didn't do it. Now you got to do it differently. The next one in this arc is the wounded child, which is the pathogen. The pathogen was often blamed for almost everything as a child. And it's a very active, fighting sort of perspective in which people were always pointing the blame at you. They were pointing you, they're saying, you're the problem. Everything went wrong because of you. And oftentimes it's because you were the squeakiest wheel. You were the one who was talking the most. You were maybe perhaps very blunt about giving your opinions. There may have been something that felt a little bit rough in your delivery of all of the things that you were able to see. And so therefore people thought that you were the easiest scapegoat. That is the pathogen. The covert of this is the sacrificial. The sacrificial is the one who says, if I give up everything, then no one will blame me. Right? Covert is where we go oftentimes when we are with somebody who is actively in the pinnacle villain form of this or actively acting as a righteous bully. We'll sacrifice our opinions, our well-being, our sense of self in order to be able to make them happy. So if you grew up with a righteous bully, you will probably understand what it means to be the sacrificial. Coming into the hero of this arc. The hero of this arc is the surrendered. It's called the surrendered because what we recognize is that surrender is the recognition that maybe your opinion or maybe the way that you see the world is not the only way to see the world. You start to let in other people's opinions. You start to let in other people's perspectives because you start to see that actually it's not just all about me and my opinion. I might not know everything. I might not be the ultimate person who's going to save this perspective. And I may have to let go of a little bit of control and a little bit of my desire to be the one who is the savior in order to be able to let things work. And you'll see this a lot as we move through Tony Stark's arc here in a second. And then the ultimate pinnacle form of this is the channeler. So I am a channeler, and if you look at my YouTube channel, you can see some of the times that I've channeled. And I can say that moving through this arc, the channeler is the one who recognizes that their opinion is almost never their opinion, in the sense that things move through them and things need to be allowed to move through them. And when you're in a channeler perspective, your own opinion, your own lens on something is usually it's very important to not put your own perspective or your own lens into something, especially if somebody's telling you a story or trying to give advice in which someone's going to tell you that something triggers you in particular, and then you put your own lens or perspective on it without actually trying to keep a more unbiased perspective. You're stepping aside and recognizing that there's something greater that can come through you, and that is the channeler. So let's look at how Thanos and Tony do this. The thing that I love, first off, let's just say in the entire Infinity Stone saga and everything that we're seeing with the Infinity Stone saga, we have Iron Man, who obviously started it all, right? It was Iron Man, Captain America, and we see both of them move through their arcs and have their final arcs really come to a close at the end of the Infinity Stone saga. And what we see also is that Thanos, even though he's very quiet as a villain, he builds up over time as the ultimate antagonist that's sitting behind Loki, that's sitting behind Ultron, that's sitting behind all of these people and all of these things. And so seeing the fact that Tony Stark and Thanos have a very similar arc it's brilliant, right? It's brilliant to actually have one person be experiencing some villainous forms. We see it in Civil War. I know other people have a lot of different opinions of it. We see it in Civil War. We see Tony Stark come through a lot of this in his own mind about where he is and what he's doing in his arc. He obviously has a number of different arcs, but this is the kind of main one that mimics and mirrors Thanos's. And then Thanos kind of keeps the same one the whole time. So let's get into it. The righteous bully. Thanos is in this form most of the time, especially in Infinity War. Thanos' main story, which we will talk about as we move through his arc, is the idea and the understanding that he has seen how bad the world can get. And because of his position as a Titan, he is capable of making a decision on behalf of the entire universe. In his most awful pinnacle villain form, he has this righteousness that what he is saying is going to save everyone. And it doesn't matter. No one is either powerful enough, intellectual enough, anything enough to be able to fight him. So therefore, he thinks that his opinion is godlike and he is able to say, yes, I am going to do this. And since nobody can defeat me, that is why I am justified and right in doing this, because I must have intellectual superiority. I must have moral superiority. I must have all these different things, and everything justifies it because of the pain that I've gone through and because of everything. So I'm going to blink everybody out. And in Infinity War, we see him say, I'm the only one who knows what it takes. At least I'm the only one who will act on it, right? Maybe he thinks that everybody thinks that the world is overpopulated, or that everybody thinks that there are too many people, and that he's saying, I know that everybody thinks this. So he's doing a switch. What we call in neurolinguistic programming is a switch, in which he's putting his own opinion into everybody else's minds around him. And then he's saying, and I'm the only one who can act on it. The righteous bully is always an actor. They are always acting for everything. And we can see him say this when he's justifying the snap to Doctor Strange. Interestingly, we have Tony Stark also in a space of the righteous bully. So going over to Tony, we can see that in the Age of Ultron in particular, we can see that Tony is the one who creates Ultron in the first place. And it is Tony's hubris that actually makes it so that he believes that I want to put a shield of armor, a suit of armor around the world. And he creates Ultron behind the team's back. He doesn't confer with anyone because he believes that he is ultimately the one who is capable of doing and making the decisions to protect everybody, because he's the one who saw the vision. He has the information, and because he has the correct information, he's the one who can then enforce whatever it is and actually make the decision to make Ultron, even though if he had conferred with any of his teammates, he would have recognized that that was not the right decision to make. And so the unilateral action that he creates, he says, I'm the only one capable of doing it, and therefore I'm the one who can make the opinion, is that he creates the entire experience of Ultron and a fair amount of destruction as a result of it, which the Avengers had to feel the fallout for. Both exert a control through intelligence. They bypass their empathy and they bypass teamwork. They bypass the ability to recognize that they need to come into team with other people and that they are not superior to other people. And they are convinced that their vision is superior. It's not just right, but righteous. Successful antagonist. How do both of them show up as the fixer? The core strategy of the fixer is if I don't solve it, it will all fall apart. Thanos in Infinity War again. He calmly walks up to Star-Lord through Titan's collapse and he said, they called me mad, but what I predicted came to pass. We see this. He tried to fix things and he didn't. And because of that, now he feels completely justified in whatever he's doing. The fixer, whoever is the fixer, recognizes that they are going to experience a world in which no one's going to listen to them. And the reason they always think no one's going to listen to them is because people aren't smart. They don't understand things along those lines. They don't realize that maybe they're being a little bit too blunt. Maybe they're actually trying to fix something that is none of their business to fix. Maybe people aren't ready for their fix. Maybe people aren't even asking to be fixed. You putting your opinion as to whether or not somebody is flawed or needs fixing, that is your opinion. It has nothing to do with the reality of the other person. You are trying to dominate their reality by saying, I want to fix you. And that's what we see as the problem with the fixer in particular. Tony represents the fixer in Civil War. He supports the Sokovia Accord, saying if we can't accept limitations, we're no better than the bad guys. He's got his tail between his legs. He is doing everything he can to be able to recognize the mistakes that he made in the Sokovia Accords. And this is ultimately what we see him trying to do. I'm trying to fix something, even though I recognize that maybe this is not the best way possible. And this is also reflective of him agreeing to the Sokovia Accords is a lot like the pathogen. But we see this, honestly, the fixer is probably the predominant thing that Tony Stark is in, because he rarely ever really wants it to escalate into a place of actually destroying other people. But most of the time, he believes that he has the best possible solution to everything. It's part of his hubris. It's part of his character, is to be incredibly confident and arrogant about his capabilities, because he is obviously quite smart and has a lot of resources at his fingertips. Most of the time, he's in the fixer, and most of the time, it doesn't come to a point of becoming the righteous bully in which he's actually making Ultron. So the fixer is hyper-rational. They are obsessed with control. They are unable to admit uncertainty. And the fixer is strategic, but also very disconnected from the team. They mistake control for compassion, and they also oftentimes are very disconnected with other people's realities. They're trying to dominate other people's realities. The wounded child, the pathogen. The pathogen in this one is the vilification for Thanos when he tells, and we only hear this apocryphally, and obviously there's probably comics that describe this, but I'm talking purely in the Marvel universe, the movie depictions of this, is that you can tell that he was considered the pathogen when he tried to warn everybody on Titan about what was going to happen, right? And so he was powerless in many ways to do anything. He was trying to deliver a message and they didn't hear, and then he was proved right, which is how he flipped into the fixer and then into the righteous bully of being the full Thanos that he is. So his position as the pathogen is ultimately what drives him. And his entire story is like, they didn't listen to me before, so I'm not going to listen to anybody now. Tony anxiety after the Battle of New York. He also recognizes, as I mentioned earlier, that his agreement to be a part of the Sokovia Accords and agree to do that is a reflection of the fact that he knew he made a mistake and he needs to now humble himself. Again, this can be that Sokovia Accords agreement, which obviously sparked the entirety of Civil War, could be him as the fixer, trying to fix his mistakes, him sacrificing his own opinion for what, everybody else is telling him is the right thing because he's got his tail between his legs. And also the pathogen, when which people say, you're the problem. A lot of him in Pepper Pot shows him in the pathogen, his inability to be able to connect with other people, to be intimate with other people, and to do what is necessary in order to be able to connect and love somebody else, as opposed to simply just being a poster child for whatever it is, for his own ego and for his own opinion. The insight into the pathogen is that their advice, and they may have been blamed for many things that were not necessarily their fault, but because they seem to be strong, or because they had blunt opinions, or because they have very strong opinions, everyone believes that they are capable of being able to handle always being the problem and taking that on. But ultimately, we recognize that that is never the case, and that we end up getting thrown into this arc when people constantly blame us and say that our opinions are to blame for everything. Sometimes they are, but a lot of the time they aren't, especially as children. The covert of this particular one is the sacrificial. The sacrificial is, I give everything and no one can blame me because of that. As I said, most of the coverts of all of these villain arcs are what you do and the place that you go to when you are around somebody who is exemplifying a stronger version of this villain. So if there's a pinnacle villain, you're saying, I'm going to be sacrificial. Thanos is the sacrificial when he sacrifices Gamora at Vormir. And he's claiming it's out of love. Of course, we can say all sorts of things about this, but for Thanos, because his opinion is so incredibly strong, sacrificing somebody he loves is something that he would find absolutely okay, but he would also see it as a sacrifice of himself, despite the fact that he is obviously not the one doing the actual sacrificing and dying. He weeps. He's incredibly sad about it because he's sad for himself in this moment that he is going to be completely unflinching and not actually listen to the one person he loves in his life. And instead, he's going to throw her over a cliff. So we recognize that his mission is so much more important than her ability to choose, because he ultimately believes that his opinion is right and he's willing to destroy another person, the only person he loves, in an effort to do that. So the sacrificial form is one that you don't necessarily see a lot with Tony, in the sense that whenever he's like, I'm going to build 30 suits to protect everybody, he's sacrificed his own well-being in order to stay an Avenger after the Battle of New York. And he's saying, I'm trying to sacrifice, I'm willing to sacrifice all these things in order to be able to save everybody else. And that is how he shows up as the sacrificial. He says it a lot. He mentions it a lot throughout in terms of what he's willing to give up in order to be able to actually move through his arc. And interestingly, when he, at the end of Infinity War, is when he truly moves into the hero. We don't see Thanos moving into the hero. We see Thanos stay stuck. We see Thanos not only sacrifice Gamora, but we also see Thanos sacrifice himself because he's achieved whatever he was. He never moves into the hero form. But Tony does move into the hero form. And the hero form of the righteous bully is the surrendered. The surrendered recognizes that they maybe don't know everything. They recognize that teamwork and being connected to a team of people and individuals with all different types of skills may be the best possible way to come through and actually solve everything that's necessary. And so we see the hero come out when Tony looks at Doctor Strange and Doctor Strange says the one thing. In that moment, Tony has to sacrifice and he has to give up and he has to surrender to a plan that he doesn't understand, that he's not allowed to understand, because if he did, then it wouldn't happen. So he has to surrender to somebody else who has a different skill set, and he has to say, okay, I'm going to go along with this. And we see this throughout the entire end of Infinity War and beginning of Endgame, in which Tony has to stop a lot of different arcs. He has an aspect of the Divisive Immortal, which you can go watch our Agatha Harkness video about the Divisive Immortal, because he has to face his own death when he's in the spaceship before Captain Marvel comes and saves him. But it's also a matter of recognizing that at the beginning of Endgame, when he is in an awful position, he's obviously too unwell to be able to actually go and see Thanos in his sacrificial form, that Tony Stark decides that he is going to fully surrender to the life that he has. He is no longer going to become the hero that he's always going to hope. And this is a nuance, because I would say that Tony, in the entire end of Infinity War and beginning of Endgame, is in the surrendered place. He's in his heroic place. He's not saying that his opinion is the best one. He's completely giving up his opinion. He's stuck in many ways in that hero surrendered position. And it isn't until he makes a decision to recognize that being a part of a team and that everybody has the capable, that he's actually able to move into the channeler. He's able to move into the channeler, and as moving through the channeler, he's led on a journey throughout all of Endgame that leads him to the moment in which he's able to fulfill all of the things that were necessary that Doctor Strange saw in that moment in order to be able to actually move through to the legend. He dies at the end as the channeler of the one thing, of the one way that they were all going to be saved. He followed his instinct. He decided that his opinion wasn't the most important opinion. He didn't freak out. He didn't say anything bad. He just rolled with it. And that is the essence of the channeler. The channeler recognizes that the effortless path of understanding is coming through them, and that their opinion of it is not the most important thing. And so the channeler in this has the core belief, I am not the source of power. I am its conduit. And in this case, Tony Stark becomes a conduit of the one thing. And we see it come up again when Doctor Strange at the end says, this is the one thing. You did it. This is the one thing. And Tony acts as that is his thing. He comes to the full end of his arc, in which the beginning of his arc, especially after we see him admitting that he's Iron Man. I am Iron Man, leaving with I am Iron Man before he snaps. And seeing the full arc of how that comes forth, right? That like his opinion and his position as Iron Man has come to a close. He ends his life between the snap and the end of his life as Tony Stark, as someone who's connected, who's loved people, who's created connections, and who has come through his hubris and his arrogance in order to be able to create true connections, who's able to create a child despite all of his fear and trauma relating to the end of the world, who's able to do so many different things such that he is fully appreciated at the end of his life. And we also see that full arc of Iron Man being the righteous bully, that the creation of Iron Man in the first place, all the way back in the beginning, in which he recognized that Earth needed a protector. And then all the hubris and all the arc that comes with Tony Stark being Iron Man needs to end in the moment before he snaps. And that's when Iron Man, as the righteous bully, has come to his full redemption, and he is now the channeler. He is now the channeler of the Infinity Stones, something that he never could have imagined when he was sitting in the cave back in the original Iron Man. And now he has come to his full fruition. And so Tony is the vessel. And we recognize that Thanos never went through the arc of the righteous bully. He stayed stuck in all the different forms, and he never moved into the hero. He never inverted to become the hero and then the legend. But Tony did. And in doing so, he turned his sacrifice into grace. The righteous bully builds a future by force and opinion. And the channeler builds a future through faith and understanding of what's there. And in the end, both Thanos and Tony Stark believed that they were saving the world. Both were willing to sacrifice everything, but only one realized that salvation isn't about control, it's about connection. Thanos died believing he was right, and Tony died knowing that he was loved. The righteous bully clings to the idea that the world must bend to their vision. And the channeler learns that the world is already bending, if only they stop resisting and let it in. And maybe that's the hardest kind of heroism. Not saving the world on your terms, but letting go enough to let the world save itself. Because in the end, it's not about being the one who fixes everything. It's about the one who finally lets go and acts as the conduit.